Hello, I'm Roberta Farion, Communications Associate at reVerb Communications.
I'm Glenn Kubish. I'm the creative lead at reVerb. Welcome to the InfraSound podcast. This is the episode we call The Rathole, the Roadway, the Relationships, and the Rebuilding.
A lot of R's.
Right you are, Roberta.
25 years ago, bridge engineer Guy Boston was in charge of design, construction, and maintenance of the road network in Edmonton when the city decided to take out the 109th Street subway tunnel.
AKA the Rathole.
Guy Boston was on the project. We caught up with Guy and got the story about the demolition of a landmark, because what happened when the city decided to remove the Rathole, it wasn't just a story about concrete and rebar. This was a story about community preservation during a time of rebirth for the city's downtown area.
It was also the story of a giant pair of scissors.
Yes, and we'll cut to it. So we hope you enjoy our conversation with Guy Boston. He's the bridge engineer, city builder, and Rathole whisperer.
Guy Boston, welcome to InfraSound. It is great to see you. Great to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much, Glenn. It's great to see you too.
Let's roll back the years a bit and watch a short account of the big news. What was making big news in March 2000 in Edmonton? Guy Boston, this was your life.
People lined up today to say goodbye to the Rathole.
The Rathole demolition party.
Too low for some trucks, too narrow for heavy traffic, so the city is filling it in. Sunday, rubber hits the Rathole for the final time.
I think it's a part of Edmonton's history.
So, Rathole. Everybody's been saying nothing but bad stuff about it. All the cars get too close.
It was built in 1928 under 25 railroad tracks to link North and South Edmonton. Historians say an unknown city councillor gets credit for giving the Rathole its name.
He said it was a big dark rat hole, and I guess the name stuck. It struck a chord in Edmontonians.
By the end of July, if all goes according to plan, this will be just another downtown intersection, and the Rathole will be history.
Cool. So, Guy, you were in charge, as I remember, of understanding and managing stakeholder relations and keeping City Council up to speed on the Rathole project. What went through your mind watching that trip through memory lane? What do you remember about the Rathole?
Well, it was a flood of memories, if I can use that as a bit of a lead into some of my memories of it. It was a problem. It was always a problem from the transportation network perspective. It was low, it was dark. I mean, it got the name appropriately, I'm going to say. And, I was bridge engineer before I became responsible for managing all of projects that were like the Rathole. And when I was bridge engineer, it got hit more than once by a high load. And the one that I remember in particular was, it was actually in that video, was a dry cement truck, a semi-truck that was a good meter higher than the Rathole was, hit it at full speed, 30 miles an hour, and all of the dry cement started leaking out of it. And my technician and I happened to be driving a block away, and we saw the poof of the gray cloud. And it was like we pulled up, and the driver was just getting out of the cab of his truck. And we leaned over and handed him our business card, and he says, "You guys are just sitting here waiting for me, weren't you?"
So 25 years later, and it's been 25 years
Yeah.
since the Rathole was decommissioned. What's the significance of the Rathole demolition and road reconstruction project in the big picture for you?
Yeah, well, as you know, I mean, there was rail yards that were there. CN. I used to work for CN. And, there was actually two ways that you could cross that rail yard. There was a bridge over at 105th Street, and there was the Rathole under on 109th Street. And as the railroad had decided to move out of downtown, it became an opportunity for the city to envision what might happen along that corridor of a fairly significant swath of land. And those two main arterials, needed to come down to grade. It needed to be brought down in the bridge case and brought up in the Rathole case, so that it daylighted everything and allowed first of all, more lanes of traffic on 109th Street, for example, although they had planned to twin the Rathole at one point in time, but they never did. To the point where it is now, where you see it's 4 or 6 lanes wide, whatever it is. It's very open. It allows, a lot of traffic to move through, and now it's allowing the LRT to go by as well.
I came to Edmonton when it was all bright and open and airy and developed, and I can't imagine I would feel the same if I had to kind of enter as a student coming downtown via this dark, dark tunnel, and what a different feeling that is. So I'm really interested in knowing what your role was on the project and kind of I guess just some of the initial thoughts that go into something like this that is really standing to change a lot about how people are experiencing the city.
So my role at the time, I was responsible for design, construction, and maintenance of the road network. So the planning and the envisioning of what was being done there was done by a different group, transportation planning and city planning. And once that was approved by city council and a budget was allocated to that project, it came over to the area that I was responsible for. So the design of the deconstruction and the construction of the new intersection would have been under my purview. The procurement of all the contractors associated with doing that under my purview. And as well, and a key point to making this such a success was that we did a value engineering exercise with the businesses that were going to be impacted by the construction, to the point that we were able to take a very significant construction timeline down to something that was shorter and much more palatable for the businesses along 104th Avenue. Well, the piece that we did here on 104th Avenue, which was the one that was of most concern to everyone, I'm going to say we did it in 4 to 6 weeks. I can't remember the exact period of time, but it was incredible. And the initial plan was going to be shut down all summer. We're going to shut down in March and we're going to open it up in October. And a lot of the businesses that are on 104th Avenue were, drive by, I think I'll get a hamburger type business, right? So they weren't a targeted business that you'd find your way around construction like we have today in downtown to get to it because you needed to get to it. It was a convenience for someone to use their business just because they could see it and get to it. So this was going to impact them hugely.
Severely, yeah.
Was there a precedent for this kind of project?
Yeah, there's lots of examples of accelerated construction, which includes destruction sometimes. And, again, the value engineering exercise that we did, that was managed by value engineers, and there are people that have that designation where you take a look at a project and you determine, if your goal is to shorten the time frame, well, that's a mindset that you're going into when you're looking at value engineering. If you're looking at saving money, there's a different set of eyes that you have when you go into that exercise. So this one here, based on the public outcry and council's concern with the impact on the businesses, was focused on what can we do to shorten the time frame of the impact on 104th Avenue. Now, we didn't get the whole Rathole done that fast, but we got this intersection open, which was the most important thing to do.
Was there a corresponding open pockets, let's spend money to make this work kind of approach?
No. In civic government, it's very transparent to the public. And, so although the businesses would say, yeah, spend whatever you got to do it overnight when we're closed and get it done, the rest of the city was saying, wait a minute, if that's going to cost another $10 million and raise my taxes by 2%, don't do it. They'll figure it out, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, I was responsible for trying to manage that relationship at council.
Was there any other obstacles that were unexpected that you guys needed to navigate?
Not in the preparation, but weather became a bit of an issue for us. And in fact, I even think it snowed. I mean, we've got this time-lapse photography, and I'm sure you've seen, that does show it rained fairly heavy, it snowed, it did a bunch of things. And
construction stops. When you look at that piece of video, you can see the direct impact of the weather.
It stopped. And, in general, in Edmonton, we look at a construction season to be from, kind of when the snow is gone and the ground is starting to thaw out until when the snow comes back and the ground starts to freeze. And you can typically expect anywhere from 7 to 10 to 12 delay days because of weather over that period of time. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the exact number of days, but it was like we were getting those number of days in this one chunk of time, the 6-week period that we had thought we'd get 1 or 2, but we got more than that. So, that was the shock from a construction perspective and ultimately meeting the timeline that the businesses wanted on that one. So that was a surprise for us.
What's involved in starting to take apart something like the Rathole? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like?
Yeah.
What did you have to decide?
Well, part of the construction is planning the detours that are required to get the traffic around that would have otherwise used the Rathole or 104th Avenue. So that's a big part of the planning before you actually shut it down. What are we going to do with traffic? Are we going to take one-way streets and turn them into two-ways? Are we going to shut down lanes, open lanes? Like, what are we going to do? So that's a big preparatory part that a lot of people, they suffer through, but there's a lot of planning that goes into that before we bring the first piece of equipment on site.
Do you know more or less how many vehicles were traveling through the tunnel in a day?
30 to 40,000, I think, is what the number was.
Okay,
yeah.
so that's significant.
It's significant, especially for a two-lane road. That is about the maximum that you can get on a two-lane road. If you start to think about, take 33,000 and divide it by 24 hours by 60 minutes, and that's how many vehicles a minute are going by, and it's significant. And so anyway, this was an issue. So once that was done, then the equipment mobilizes, and the first thing you had to do was just break up everything that was on the surface over top of the rat hole so that you could see the concrete structure. And it's a concrete arch. And, the solution that was being come up with, which was going to accelerate everything, was rather unique because it was initially envisioned that, there'd be big jackhammers that would come out on excavators. You've seen the big ones, right? And they just break it up slowly and pieces that come down, and there'd be guys in there with blowtorches cutting the rebar off and, and hauling it away. Well, what came out in the value engineering was, let's get the biggest scissors you can find and cut down the top of the rat hole and drop it in.
Lengthwise.
North
to south, south
north
to
to south.
Okay.
So we started in the north end, and it's just great big scissors, crunchers, and it cut through the concrete.
Okay, when you say
through-
scissors, I'm picturing shears that you use for sewing, but what's that piece of equipment? What is it?
It's huge. So picture, those excavators that keep hitting the white mud bridge on Anthony Henday Drive?
Right.
They're big. And you can put different attachments on the front of that. It can be a shovel, it can be a jackhammer. We found big scissors. It's like shears. They're huge. And they're hydraulic, and they are extremely strong, well, to the point where it literally can cut through 1.5 feet of concrete and all the rebar that's there.
You talk about the dry cement truck hitting it and like the big plume, and then you talk about these giant scissors, and I just can't imagine that, like, was this a Bugs Bunny cartoon that's just taking place? It's like Acme is doing the city construction, and it's really hard to envision it's so simple. It seems cartoonish, but that was the solution.
It was. And part of that solution, so you couldn't get through everything. So you imagine trying to cut anything with scissors that's got, thick threads or something through it. You don't get it all, but then you can come in behind with blowtorches, cut those to the point where it's all disconnected, and, the two halves of the arch would fall in. And, so the plan, and I think there's a picture somewhere in the material that shows the number of ancillary equipment that was around at the time to support this hurry up, let's get this thing cut, the Bugs Bunny approach to, getting this, I prefer the Roadrunner.
It does have
Wile E.
Roadrunner.
Coyote and all that kind of stuff, because, it seems stupid and usually, he dies in the end, but no. We lived. This is an Acme approach to taking it down. And this is part of, what comes out of the value engineering is what can we do, and there was a thought at one point in time about taking a big saw, so again, very cartoonish stuff, but this stuff exists, You think about, the LRT tunnel, it's a big drill, it's a 20-foot high drill, but it goes through the ground. So this stuff exists, and materials and equipment are a global resource these days. So, if you go back 100 years when it was built, 25 years, sorry, but, you go back along, 1927, almost 100 years, resources and equipment were not looked at that way. It was, the level of communication wasn't there, the ability to find out what people have done around the world was not as, as pronounced as it is now. And, and I learned that again in the LRT project, that those big 22-foot diameter drills that go through the earth, those machines, they're world resources. And you actually put it out to the world that we're putting in a tunnel, and we need a drill that big.
Mm-hmm.
Similar story with like the gantry cranes that we see on the Valley Line West and on the Grote Bridge as well.
Right.
Last saw action in the Middle East.
Right. There you go.
Right.
So it's perfect. And, and if Edmonton had to build or buy something specifically for a project here, that contractor in their bid understands the world demand for that, and they may or may not, depends, charge the whole cost of that piece of equipment to our project. But if they can sell it for 50 or 60% of that value somewhere in the world, good on them.
So was that an innovation? Did the Rathole project host that new kind of thinking for the first time in reality? In Edmonton?
I think Edmonton is very unique in that regard. So even like Clark Stadium, for example, if I can use that as an example. The City of Edmonton has been recycling asphalt and concrete for many, many years. Clark Stadium was dismantled, it was taken apart, crunched up into pieces of concrete about the size of my fist, and used to build 99th Street south of White Avenue as the base. So, there's unique things that Edmonton has done that, this might sound unique, and it might have been the first time the big scissors were used for a rat hole type project. But, I've got to say the City of Edmonton that I worked with for a number of years, I found to be very progressive and open to unique approaches to deconstructing or constructing.
So the stadium that I watched Wilkie and George McGowan and Ron Lancaster play is now what I'm driving on 99th Street.
It is.
Go Elks.
Just laced in nostalgia for you. I'm so happy for you.
It doesn't go without teamwork, and team building exercises occur in just about every project there is, so it's a group of people, 3 or 4 different groups of people, designers, builders, managers, engineers, that are being thrown together on a project for the first time, and to have a team building exercise so each can understand a little bit more about the company or that group of people and what their role is in the project, or what talents they're bringing to it, or what their concerns are with it, that can be offset by some of the talents on the other members, is a key part of that. And it's anybody who's been involved in projects, every time you have a team building session, you kind of roll your eyes. You go, oh, here we go. But they're fantastic. You need to have it, especially if you haven't worked together. And on this case here, because there was value engineering, we had 2 types of team building, right? So we had, representative from the contractor, the designer, media relations, all these people in a room together initially to work through, what are we going to do to make this work quicker than we had originally planned. And then you have a team building exercise that, that has more people in a room that takes what you've decided to do and almost introduce it to your teams there, and who's going to do what and how we're going to make it work.
When did part 2 of the project start taking place? The reconstruction of the roads, I would imagine curbs, sidewalks, gutters. Yeah. Were you part of that as well?
Yeah, all the way through to commissioning. In fact, the culmination in my mind, and I can still pick it, and the project manager we had on it, Hugh Donovan was his name. And, Hugh and I were hooked at the hip through this whole project, so when we were doing public consultation with the businesses up and down 104th Avenue, and I typically wouldn't go to these, but because it was such a high profile, I went with the project manager to these meetings. And so to answer your question, the surface part, well, in my mind, the culmination of a success was day or 2 before it was supposed to open. Him and I are standing on the intersection that's fully built. It's got the lines painted on it. It's ready to go. We kind of looked around. We looked up and down. We looked at each other, and we hugged each other.
That's a very Edmonton infrastructure moment. Thanks for sharing that.
You really built a connection there.
Oh my God.
That's great.
So we stood in the middle, we hugged, and then it was like we backed up, and we knew that the Canadian Film Board was doing this time-lapse photography, and we both looked up there and thought, is this going to be on camera?
What was a typical day on the project like for you, meeting with the with area residents or area businesses? Do you have vivid memories of those meetings? Because you were building, you were taking apart a rat hole, you were building a roadway, but you were also building something else as well at the same time, another kind of infrastructure, maybe the infrastructure of trust or transparency or relationship building. You built a relationship as well, which is infrastructural, I would argue, as well. What do you remember about how that worked? Maybe how it didn't, or what your takeaways were?
So thanks for asking that, because that is the stuff that people don't see, and the relationship building along the corridor was critical as well. And in early days, and again, because of the profile of this project, I went with Hugh to some of these stakeholder meetings. And I'll never forget this one. There was a car dealership on 104 Avenue that was going to be impacted almost right near the rat hole. And the meeting was at their boardroom. And so Hugh and I walk into this boardroom that probably 3 times the size of this room that we have here. had 40 or 50 people in it. They'd been there for an hour before we showed up, and it was like coming into a mosh pit. And so the person that was chairing that meeting was the owner of the car dealership. And he had the crowd revved up into a fury. And so this is before we had done the value engineering. So we're going in there, here's what the project's going to be. It's going to be closed all summer. We'll put up signs so people know how to find your business. And we got attacked. And the leader of the attack got very vocal to the point where I turned to Hugh and said, we're leaving. And Hugh said, well, we can't. We're here for stakeholder. I said, we don't have to take this abuse. And I said it loud enough so they could all say it.
Right.
So we got up and walked down the stairs, and they're yelling at us. And we're out to and it's like, no, this is not stakeholder involvement. Yeah. This is an attack. And so we got out in the parking lot. We were about to get into my car to drive away. And I said, let's just stand here for a second. Let's see if somebody pops down. Sure enough, 2 guys come running out of that meeting. And they were running the Tim Hortons and Wendy's that was down.
I remember.
These 2 gentlemen came down, and they apologized profusely. They said this was not fair. We asked you to come here to tell us what was going on. We just told you what we thought of you guys and the city in general. And, good on you for leaving. And Hugh, who, as his manager, I had said, you're there for stakeholder meeting. You're going to have to take it in the eyes. You have to hear what they have to say. And I said, we're leaving. He went, what? And so it's vivid in my mind because, you brought up the fact of, the hidden part of infrastructure planning is the stakeholder involvement. So these 2 gentlemen that owned, again, a very impacted business by this, said, we're going to set something up. We're going to recast it appropriately so that we can do this.
Right, and?
They did. So it was about 2 days later, different venue. That same guy that was running the other show came, sat in the corner. They basically told him to sit and listen. And so we heard what their concerns were. We said, okay, we'll get back to you. We set up the value engineering. I let these 2 gentlemen know who were putting the communicating with the rest of the businesses that we're going to do a value engineering on it. Kind of every week told them the progress on what we were doing. And then when we finally got to a spot where we thought we had something, called them up and they said, well, let's get the same people together. And then we told them what our plan was. And this might not be true, but in my mind, I'd like to think they stood up and give us a standing ovation.
Everyone didn't hug.
Not at that point.
Stayed short of that. So I understand. What do you mean by value engineering?
Yeah, so that's where, as I said before, that if you're trying to get value out of a project, save money. That's what the focus is. If you're trying to accelerate a project, that's what the focus is from an engineering and a construction management perspective. You have a goal of what you're trying to achieve, and you bring everybody into it and say, okay, we could do this in 48 hours if we had $1 billion. Well, okay, that's not value engineering. That's just craziness, right? Mm-hmm. So what can we do? Here's our budget. Is there something that we haven't thought of that we can do that will accelerate this?
How do you decide between time and money?
So the stakeholders that we discussed, their concern was the length of time. Okay, let's focus on that. So then that falls into the purview of the designers and the constructors, which were under my purview. Let's get a value engineering exercise going so that we can work towards this goal of reducing the amount of impact on 104th Avenue specifically, right? So the entire Rathole project still took the entire summer. Mm-hmm. But the portion that the stakeholders were most interested in accelerating, we accelerated and got it done. So it was, if you look at the project as 3 steps, demolish, rebuild the intersection of 104th and 109th Street, and then finish the rest. It still took the whole summer to do it. Mm-hmm. But the part that they were most interested in, we knocked off in record time.
This Rathole fill-in was kind of the kickstart to a new downtown, if that's accurate.
Oh, absolutely. With the rail yards in any downtown, and most cities in Canada start with the railroad right down the middle, mm-hmm.
Is
a challenge, for city building. You're going to have north of the tracks and south of the tracks, right? I live north of the tracks, and it comes with a connotation,
North of the tracks?
Yeah, we're both up there, Glenn. And, so getting the tracks out of downtown was huge mm-hmm. for the redevelopment of downtown to make it a place where people would actually like to live. And, working downtown, let's go back to 25 years. That was the the main employment center in Edmonton and most cities, and there's been things that have happened over the last 25 years that have caused that to disperse a bit. So, having residents in a downtown is key to making it very lively. And again, prior to 2020, Edmonton's downtown residential component was, going great. And I'm going to say it's, not a small part due to the fact that, the railway tracks left, the city has built, a learning center, a university downtown. It brings a life to the downtown.
And the LRT.
Well, and the LRT. That would not have happened had, the railway not left and the city not taken advantage of this land and develop in a way that was going to support a vibrant downtown.
What was the vision like at the time? Did you know when this intersection was finished, kind of what the next stages were going to be for executing a downtown plan?
I knew of them. So again, as much as team building is important on projects that you're bringing in outside consultants, team building and knowing what's going on in the city is also very important. So, my role as being the manager of design, construction, and maintenance of the road network is to be plugged into the transportation planning and city planning that's going on so that, again, it's just like somebody building great big cathedrals back in the the Dark Ages, where if you were to ask a guy that was building the foundation what he was doing, he says he's building a cathedral, but it'd take 100 years to come to fruition. But that's what his vision was, right? So same thing. Okay, I'm taking the Rathole down, I'm building this, and it's all it is it's asphalt and concrete and a bunch of noise and dust. But you know what? This is going to be a cool spot, 25 years from now.
And do you think it's a cool spot?
It's a very cool spot.
As you were coming here today, did you pass by that way?
I did. I came right underneath it, and it's with the pedestrian, the McEwen pedestrian overpass. It feels like a gateway. It feels like you're coming into something into downtown, and it's fantastic.
There are little plaques on both sides of the road.
There's a funny story about that.
That say 1927 on them.
So, again, everything was focused on, let's get rid of this thing. It's a scourge on the city. Right. Let's just forget it ever existed. Let's get rid of it. And so the mayor of the time, Bill Smith, was all excited about this. And in some of the celebrations that happened before we took the Rathole down, the mayor envisioned, let's take every car that we can find in the city of, one decade from, 1927. So let's have a 1920, a 1930, a 1940s, vehicle and drive it through the Rathole. So he always came up with these ideas. He was a real car guy. So he came up with this idea. And, so we did this on the closing day of it, and it was a big celebration, and it was a lot of fun. So now we're mashing up. Now we're into business. We're taking this thing down. And Bill says, and Bill Smith and I had a pretty close relationship. Guy, what happened to those things at the end? I said, all those keystones at the end. Yeah, what'd you do with those? I said, I don't know. He says, find them. We got to keep those things. Okay, so we found them. And we kept them. And I can't remember where we kept them, but they were somewhere. And it was like, well, what are we going to do with these?
Those are the ones that had 1927 inscribed on them? Okay.
Exactly, okay. Yeah. So And so we had these things, and then we were working with our communications department at the time, and what are we going to do? We're going to make a plaque out of them? And it's like, well, let's just put them on the ground somewhere and call it art. Let's do that. So we did.
Those are the real things.
They're not duplicates. Those
I
are
did
the
not know
real
that.
Things.
And they took some digging to find.
They were not protected exclusively, but I think the contractor was smart enough to know this could be something. So,
Guy, is there more attention and importance given now, and if so, why, to preserving elements from a project that is moving or decommissioning or being demolished? It seems that there's a lot more work done these days to talk to people about those objects, to preserve them.
I think it is fair. I don't know the specific timing that happened. I do know what happened on the Rathole, so that would have been in 1999 or 2000, whatever it was. But it seems to me that it had started before that, and for some reason, everybody else was focused on this particular project. It didn't cross our minds as it should have. And, I don't know if that was our responsibility as the deconstructors and constructors, or that was somebody else's. But it's now more top of mind, I'm going to say, of the deconstructors and the constructors, to make sure that somebody has thunk of that.
Right.
I got to stop saying thunk. Thought of it. I know what the proper English for that.
taking apart, generally speaking, taking apart seems to not have the same kind of appeal, common attraction, sexiness as building something new. Do you agree with that? Do we overlook the art of taking something away?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, except for the ones that are rather spectacular. Like, you want to take down an old hotel and implode it and drop it to the ground. Well, that's fantastic. You can sell tickets to those types of events.
Coliseum.
Right. When I first came to Alberta, I was working for the railroad. And one of the first things that I did, as I was bridge engineer for CN, was there was a bridge that was across the North Saskatchewan River at Fort Saskatchewan at one point in time. And that the railroad was being redirected so that it wasn't going through Fort Saskatchewan, so that bridge was no longer needed. And we dropped that bridge into the river with explosives. And we had a competition, and some kid in grade 5 got to push the button and drop the bridge into the river. So, there is some sexiness, if I can use that word, to some demolition. But then, who wanted to watch, piece by piece it get cut and carried away out of the river?
Right.
Nobody does, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you commune in any way with the builders of that structure? Did you sense that you were taking apart someone's work? Do you respect that in a way in your process, or is it gung-ho, let's get rid of this stuff?
I'm such a pragmatist, so it's a job we got to do. Let's just do it. Again, I've only been in Edmonton since 1984. So the Rathole had been here a long time, and we took it down 10, 15 years after I'd been here. So it wasn't endeared into my DNA as much as a lot of other people. So to me, it was a job. Got to get it done.
Right.
And that sounds rather cold, but if there was something of huge significance, well, man, if I can use the Walterdale Bridge, for example, so that's where the signature bridge is now. Well, when I was bridge engineer at the City of Edmonton, the south abutment needed repair. If you can picture it, that's one by the Kinsman.
Right.
And I just come from the railroad, so I still didn't quite understand city business, but I figured I'm the bridge engineer, I'm looking after this thing. So we repaired that whole south abutment. And I just said, let's put a great big hiker, a biker, a skier, embossed into the concrete and paint it green. That's fantastic. So I did that. And my boss...
So you are a poet.
Well, maybe. So my boss says, who said you could do that? I said, no, I just did it. Well, you can't do that. You got to go to the design committee, you got to do this, do that. He says, don't ever do that again. Later that afternoon, the mayor called him and said, that's fantastic. In fact, to the point where that abutment is still there. They left that as my legacy in the city. So I'm very happy. So if ever down by the Kinsman and you go by on that pathway that's along the river, my abutment is still there.
That is beautiful. I love that. I think, are we warmed up? Can I jump into this?
We're warmed up.
Okay, so my inspiration, I've got an intense question, courtesy of Will Strauss and Neil Howe. They wrote The Fourth Turning, which kind of takes you through the 4 phases in a generation, I should say. I want to think about it as Edmonton's downtown kind of growth. And so in their book, they talk about the 4 turnings. It's the high, the awakening, the unraveling, and the crisis. But it sounds like when the Rathole, and they all have different characteristics, obviously, and how people react and what community values are like. But in the high, community values are strong, and there tends to be a strong vision. I want to say that the Rathole project took off during that type of time where Edmonton was ready for a change. The rail yards were leaving. It was time for growth. It's kind of an unsexy start to a turning, but that tends to be how it works. You have to fill in a hole, and what's left isn't necessarily of the same significance. Like you said, you look at a stretch of lanes that looks like any other road, where there used to be a hole, but it means a lot for where growth is going to take place. So I want to ask you about what the mood is like during that time when you're doing this project that just kind of needs to get done. You can do something like commemorate it with blocks, but mostly it's just utilitarian things need to happen. What's the mood like kind of going forward, if any of that lands with you?
It does, and I think I have to read this book.
It's a good one.
But the interesting economic environment of the time was, we were into tax cuts as opposed to tax increases. It was huge austerities that were occurring at the time. The provincial government was leading the way, and our mayor was following very closely in those footsteps. And this project had been approved before the austerity. So projects like this are 5 years in the works until you stand in the middle of the intersection and hug somebody, right? So it's planned, it's budgeted, the budget's approved, it goes all the way through. So I'm answering your question with this kind of, it's not quite as high level intelligence around it, but, the environment of the time was around austerity. And it seemed like a lot of things that we should have been doing in the city, we weren't. We stopped doing a lot of things because of this austerity. And, so projects were utilitarian. And, this was utilitarian, even though it's a rat hole and it's, it's got some, sway to it from a perspective of that. It was just utilitarian. Let's get rid of that thing and put something in here that needs to help this city move. It was about transportation mostly, because from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, it's a bottleneck. We got to do something about this. And, even though the bigger vision was, it's going to be what it looks like today, it was being done in this austere time that it just felt like things were utilitarian. So we might have been poised and ready for that, but there was things going on in the world that were stifling it.
Yeah. That's actually because you're coming out of a crisis, right? Like before that was a time that was kind of coming to its end, which is like the rail yards. And then afterwards, the university is built right there. And the period that follows is, the awakening. And that's kind of where cultural exploration starts taking place. And people kind of after that sacrifice of being austere for so long, like they're ready to kind of start developing a cultural movement that actually resonates with them because they're looking for value somewhere. So it sounds like that's really what happened.
Well, and in my mind, and again, I'm a bridge engineer, so I was a bridge engineer for the railroad, very utilitarian structures that happen there. It's just to carry a train in the middle of the bush, to bridge engineer here. And I was just responsible for maintaining the existing bridges. And everything here was very austere. It was very utilitarian. It's a bridge, it's a bridge, it's a bridge. The thing that changed that was a pedestrian bridge that was built from Fort Edmonton Park across the river. A suspension bridge. Like, what? It's not utilitarian? We're doing something better than that?
Imagine.
And that started the ball rolling around. We don't have to make things look like crap. And I think one of our mayors said that, right? Yeah. And so we've got, the bridge that replaced my old Walterdale Bridge. That is fantastic. That is a world-class bridge. Quickly followed by the LRT bridge, which is a world-class bridge that is anything but austere or utilitarian. It's actually meant to say something about our city. So in my mind as a bridge engineer, and remember I'm an engineer, so I'm not as philosophical as other people, but the first fancy bridge that came here, I think, was an awakening. It's like, we can be something better than a utilitarian northern city.
Well, I think nailed it. Good job.
What's the lesson of the rat hole? Does it still have relevance for us today?
The work around it, the public engagement, the willingness of partners to come together to create a solution that will, be a legacy for them. So the consulting firm, the constructors, the designers, everybody looked at this as, wow, this was a success, and that, the award that we got for it, kind of really puts together the fact that, this is a lesson learned that we should continue to move forward with that type of a model of engagement, which the city has been. These public meetings, I'm going to be at a stage, and I had been on many other projects. Like we were doing neighborhood, this is not the only construction project. This is the one we're talking about here today. There's probably 100 that I was involved with over my career. But, communications, stakeholder involvement, council buy-in, council communication, like even just background stuff to council, and again, I would work through my general manager and the city manager saying, hey, I got this, information piece on what we're doing with the rat hole. And they said, get it to them. So yeah, that's the biggest learning from my perspective. Public opinion can sway the most successful project, in the end. But if it isn't understood why we're doing it and why it's going to take as long as it does and what the impact is going to be to you, but what the benefit could be to you when it's done, it's problematic. You know, I'm not your typical engineer. You know, I don't want to demean engineers, you know, and they're all about the numbers, and God bless all of us for that, because that's really what we do. But, you know, I really enjoy taking the, you know, the tedium of engineering and bringing it to a level that people can understand and appreciate from a holistic perspective, you know. So as much as I love the numbers and I can grind the numbers and I can design a bridge, I'm actually I'm passionate about selling, if I can use that word.
Making a bridge to the public.
There you go.
I was kind of debating some research to bring into this, and I was thinking about Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point, and he talks about
Well, this is Guy Boston Book Club today.
Yeah, it's another one. But I think this was hilarious because for a trend or an idea to catch on, he kind of identifies 3 groups, and it's the connectors, the people with social networks, the mavens, which are the information specialists, and then literally the salesmen who like convince the public. And you're kind of, you got like a finger in each pie, and you're a really interesting person to have on these types of projects because you really see the bigger picture, not just in what the thing looks like in the end, but all of the steps to get there and what it takes to have support behind it. Like, that is a really interesting kind of background and personality that you've put together to do this job.
Yeah, more than once, my fellow engineer said I should, you know, turn my ring in because I was more of a salesman than an engineer. Ouch! Oh, it was painful, and I actually lost my original ring on the West Coast Trail on a hike 2 years ago. So that I cried for a week.
What was the award that you talked about?
We decided to put it in for a Project of the Year award with the American Public Works Association. So we did, and we put together a really nice package, you know, and you know, we hired a writer to put some things together that, even though I'm a good salesman, I'm not a very good writer, and pictures, and you know, we had the time-lapse photography. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that we had, and so anyway, we submitted it, and lo and behold, we won. Wow! So. We got the award on September 10th, 2001. Ooh. And we were so happy, a bunch of us decided to go to New York the next day. And it's a train ride. It's only about it's a 40-minute train ride if you pay $80 US, or it's a 2.5-hour ride if you pay $20 US. Well, I wasn't going to pay $80 US. Saved my life. Because we would have been, and we were going to the World Trade Center, we would have been there at 7:30 in the morning, and it would have been bad.
Wow.
I didn't see that coming.
No.
I did not expect that a conversation about concrete and asphalt and curbs and gutters and tunnels would put such a premium on the human infrastructure behind a project.
Absolutely, and I would love to know your general sentiment now on where the Rathole is, that 109th Street area, because, I mean, you put so much of yourself into the project. It obviously took quite a bit out of you. When you travel down that area now, what feelings, thoughts do you have?
So I've told my kids, you know, who they remember the Rathole, you know, they're almost 40 years old, but my grandkids, you know, there used to be a hole here. Mm-hmm. So what? You know, and to them, it's like, well, downtown's always been like this. And I said, well, no, it wasn't. And
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been 25 years since the Rathole left us. Thanks for sharing your perspectives on it. You taught us a lot about how to see infrastructure, how to see the infrastructure behind the infrastructure. Thanks for being here. Do you want to go for a little walk by the Rathole?
I'd love to.
Let's do it.
Let's go check it out. Thank you, Guy Boston.
So what's it like being back here?
It's fantastic. I've never worn this hat before, and to be walking down this alley with all these people who probably never heard of the Rathole.
They've never heard of the Rathole. So this is where it was?
Right here, right to our left as we're walking was the Rathole. I think it was pretty much center line, so maybe under the median would be where it is. So we widened out on both sides of it to make the road.
So here we are. You called this a keystone, did you?
Yeah, but not in the true sense of the word. This was reinforced concrete, so it was meant to look like the keystone of an old-fashioned masonry arch. But it was just a date stamp. We call it the date stamp. Got a crack in it. Look at that.
Look at that. What does the plaque say?
Oh, the Rathole. Well, there we go. See? So this is what it looked like around.
So you were just a boy in the construction at the time of construction?
Yeah, thanks, bud. Yeah.
Oh, here's the closing day parade.
Yeah, I'm in that picture somewhere.
This site marks the location of the Rathole, a north-south oriented transportation tunnel which linked the downtown with the northern sector of Edmonton. It served the City of Edmonton for 73 years until its closure on April 2nd. Loved by some and hated by others, the Rathole created a unique experience in the daily routine of Edmontonians.
Yeah, it's a piece of rebar. This is a sawed piece. It's obviously very clean.
Yeah.
And it managed to cut the rebar right down the middle as well. So, yeah. Most of where I spent my life was down on 104th Avenue piece of it, because this was not being done at the time. That was our priority, to work on that one. So anytime I came to visit that project, it was primarily for that 104th Avenue corridor piece. The demolition, the speed and the pace of the demolition, right. I needed to know if it was going to be on time or not. So I was with the project manager almost every time he came here. I came with him, and I was most focused on that. And once we got it open and the hug occurred, it was his baby.
How far beneath the surface is the Rathole now?
So it's 3.3 meters high. The floor of it, I'm going to say, is probably 5 meters below us here. So that's like, let's say 15 feet. Actually, I think the 9th Street has been widened, because I see that line of asphalt there. I think other lanes have been added to it since the original cross-section that we put in.
You can tell by that seam?
Yeah, that seam. Yeah, it looks like this whole, that's probably where the curb was originally that we built, and it's been widened since then.
These students would not be here waiting for the bus if we still had the city yards, and if we still had the city yards, we'd have maybe another Rathole, and we'd still be in 1999.
We'd have a real hard line between North and South Edmonton.
Oh, that's interesting. The Rathole was actually a barrier, wasn't it?
People will say the river is, but I'm going to say the railroad was probably a big chunk of that. North of the tracks, south of the tracks.
Right.
I think we need a shot close up of the hats.
What's the story of the hat?
Yeah, so the hat, again, was part of our celebration of getting Project of the Year, and it's almost worthwhile to get the partners on it. So, I mean, there's Standard General, there's Morrison Hirschfield, and somebody else is
Wayward
Construction. They're all on there, and they were all part of the partners with success of the Rathole. At that manhole there, project manager Yehu Donovan and I had a little hug to celebrate the completion of the intersection.
Very nice.